I'll make it right again, but it's no use. You said, and my hunger grows and grows. I have to write the meaning of my life, or else everything's in vain. When the glory tries to tempt you, it may seem like what you need. But if glory makes you happy, why are you so broken up? So tell me how it felt when you walked on water. Did you get your wish? Floating to the surface quicker than you sank. I know. So tell me how it felt when you walked on water. Did you get your wish? Floating to the surface quicker than you sank. I know. Don't say you lose, just yet get up and move ahead, and not only for yourself, 'cause that's your role, the work that stirs your soul, you can make for someone else. One day you choke, your urges
Well. Happy
overflow.
Wednesday to you all. Hope you guys are having a great week so far. Thank you for tuning in to Midnight Hatter Live, the weekly variety show where we talk Gundam gaming. And today, some DIY projects, nothing carpentry related. We're going to keep it technical and hobby related. I'm, of course, Steven, aka Midnight Hatter, your host. And joining me, as always, is the Gundam explainer, Adam Blue. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, doing good, doing good. Yeah. Speaking of Gundam, I'm seeing the Seed Freedom movie uh,
Again?
tonight. I didn't see. I'm seeing
Oh,
the
you
dub.
you're
Yeah.
seeing the dub.
Yep.
I had to give away my ticket because my wife's working tonight. So
Yeah. It's
so
tough.
this is where I'd put my my Seed Freedom ticket if I had one.
Well, and this makes up for the same thing happened when Cuckoo's No One's Island came out. They had a dub that was going to be here, and then I think one of my youngest was sick or something, and I something
Yeah,
happened. I remember it happens, but
it does.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I am excited to watch it eventually. The early reviews are in and it's sounding like it's pretty good.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm excited. Good to see you all in chat. Ultronymous, Zeonic Shadow, I'm repping for you here today. King Dylan, Johnny Tacoma, Dan, Rogue New Type, Simply New Type. We've got like all the new types in here. It kind of reminds me of that scene from Family Guy where they're going through all of the Star Wars people. It's like Red 5 standing by, Simply Red standing by, like Red Fox standing by. Um, yeah, we got enough new types in the chat.
That's
So
cool.
today is kind of a fun, because last week was kind of a heavy show, I feel like. We were talking about a lot
Yeah,
of deep and introspective stuff. Today we're gonna just hopefully kind of inspire you guys with some neat little DIY things that I've come across. Some of them I've talked about before, others I have not. Some of them I have built and done things with and that you guys have seen. Others I am maybe considering doing, but hopefully this will be some stuff to inspire you guys to, dust off your cutting mats and all that good stuff. So, yeah.
yeah. I think yesterday you linked to me, and I don't know if we're going to be talking about this, but that FPGA. What, so
Oh, yes, the
so
mister.
because that's something I've always looked at but never got into. So it's kind of a DIY thing. It's video game based. It's almost like emulating the hardware via software so that it plays ROMs like 100% like it should.
And there
Um,
are some big updates on that, so I'm glad you
yeah,
brought that up. We'll probably, touch on that because there's a lot of, gaming DIY stuff that I wanna talk about.
cool.
But first, I guess we'll hop into what kind of inspired this is so for Christmas, My sister bought my daughter one of these Tony Box devices, which if you guys are not familiar with it, this is basically like a little Bluetooth speaker that plays, music and stories and stuff like that. And it's got these like little amiibo style magnetic base figures that you put on top and
I
play
can't
different.
believe you took that from her just for a video. What is she just sitting
She's
there without any
fine.
toys? No.
She stopped crying about 6 minutes ago. We're
Oh,
good to
okay.
go. um, but hey, full disclaimer, like, so, obviously I've got the little Rapunzel figure on here because my daughter loves Tangled,
Ah,
but the Disney Tonys do not have authentic Disney songs on them. They're all covers, which is kind
interesting.
of disappointing.
Saved
So
them some
that
money probably.
yeah, exactly. I'm sure that there's like some licensing stuff with that. I know Goose probably in the past we've talked about like how the reason that Gundam games use SD characters instead of the proper proportioned
Oh,
mobile suits is
yeah.
because of licensing issues, which is interesting to think about. Just because you have the rights to use a certain property doesn't mean that you have the rights to use their likenesses, which is kind of a weird.
Yeah. It's all it's and that's gonna change as AI evolves too. Yeah.
I know, it's crazy. So there's actually a company out there, they have, like, exclusive rights on, what would you call it? Like, digital recreation, AI generated talking that people do, and actually, in order to get a sample of what your speech pattern is, it's actually a phrase that basically, gives the rights to use your likeness. So it's like you speak this key phrase that's like, I permit this company to use my likeness in their, AI productions. And that sample is enough for them to generate text to
Wow.
speech video. It's pretty impressive stuff, but they're not gonna debut that during an election year, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, that's gonna be crazy.
We are just headed straight for the dystopian highway at full speed. So that said, I got onto a little bit of a Reddit thread about like, Tony box hacking because there are a lot of parents that are like, man, I wish I could do cool stuff with my Tony box and, upload my own songs and stuff like that. Well, as it turns out, your Tony adventure is about to start. So there are ways to get your own NFC chip and, upload data to it, but they actually have custom, my Tonys uh that you can program with your own like up to 90 minutes of content on and play audio from. And so this is something that's interesting. For me, I'm thinking to myself, well, hey, first of all, I want to make Tonys that play the actual Disney songs that my daughter likes. But, furthermore, I think it might be interesting to take some of those. Okay, see
Yeah.
now where is the
Like, I can imagine it, like, having my Tony set up, the box, and then having a high grade Zeta that has an NFC chip on the bottom that plays the soundtrack to Zeta, and
exactly, and
that's
that's
awesome.
basically where I'm getting at with this is, with the My Tonys, come on, I maybe I have to search for the creative Tonys. So there's like a
Oh.
line of Tonys that are actually cheaper than the, like, licensed character ones,
Oh,
um,
makes sense.
and they basically are just little blanks that have the NFC chip in them and have a magnet in them. Oh, yeah, here you go.
Oh,
So
wow.
the DIY Creative Tony. Let's open this guy up so we can look at it. So it comes as just like a figure that you're supposed to paint, and it's got the magnet in the base. It's got the NFC chip so that you can, upload your stuff to the website. And oh yeah, look at this little girl painting her Tony. My suggestion is, like you said, you take the magnet out, you take the NFC chip out, you put it in a Gunpla, and then all of a sudden you have, you know, a Gundam Tony that plays
And
cooler stuff.
so what is this like is this chip something, and I don't know if you know this, that requires, and it might show here, another device to then USB it to your computer? Um, do you happen
So
to know?
that's a good question. I'm not sure exactly how you get your content uploaded to the chip. I know that you upload it from the website. So,
Yeah, and it's interesting because, speaking of amiibos, how you can just buy just random things that just have that data on it. So it's interesting that
Exactly.
it seems very easy to get data from NFCs. I even think when they were selling the amiibos for some time, they had something underneath it in the packaging to stop people from just
Scanning
scanning
it.
and getting the data they need. Um, it's a neat technology. I even have NFC on my Sony mirrorless A6000, and I use it to this day. I mean, I the video that went up yesterday about the Justice, it was I take my pictures, I NFC on my phone so I can kinda look and share, and I love
See, that's
that
awesome.
technology. Yeah.
See, and I imagine that there's other applications out there or other hardware that has that capability, and we're probably gonna look at some of it, here in just a moment. But yeah, I mean, I figure if you're not proficient in, like, the coding and the actual hardware programming of that side of it, you know, getting a Tony and just cutting it open and putting 3D printing maybe a figure and
Oh, yeah.
putting I mean, that would be just as cool to me. So that's something that I might do, especially for 10 bucks, like, that's you
And
know,
and, even though this is for this Tony box, I believe the way it could be programmed potentially on whatever figurine or whatever use could have multi-uses outside of just on the Tony box. And maybe it is a way that you are carrying data that then you could,
yeah,
transfer
and
to other things.
actually, Kyle's saying it's probably an API call to the servers, which makes sense. Like, if you were to upload it and then it's stored on a server, then it just,
Oh, like it's almost like an in-app thing that's going on where it's communicating
yeah,
directly to it. Yeah, that would make sense. That would actually and that makes it easier for the end user that, the people that aren't super technical. Um,
yeah, which ties into what you and I were talking about before the show started is like, pro versus anti-consumer
oh,
behaviors.
yeah, exactly.
That is definitely one of those probably accidentally pro-consumer
Yeah.
moves. Like, if they had the option, they would probably not make it that, but, like,
Yeah,
I
it's
suppose
weird how that yeah, universal systems. Like, it's interesting how some companies like Microsoft in the DOS days was like, "Yeah, we'll make it for any hardware." But, some companies then like Apple like to keep things walled in. It's interesting to see the outcomes. They're always different.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I know that, like, I've launched an app in the past, and it was so much easier to obviously get it on an Android phone than it was to get it cleared through the Apple App Store. I mean, it
Okay.
was just a nightmare. So, eh.
Yeah.
But, moving on to the next one, this is one I've talked about a lot, so I've shown this guy off to you, several times, the old, Tiny Circuits miniature video kit screen, I think it's still got some battery in it. Yeah, it's got Garen speech loaded up there.
Oh,
I need to get a video of the screen for my Zeta 3D print that we're gonna do, the Zeta Gundam cockpit, because
yeah.
that diorama I think is gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Now, to that end, I don't think that I've ever actually shared the Tiny Circuits website, which they have a whole host of DIY kits that may or may not appeal to any or all of you. So, like, for instance, they have this one, the Tiny Saber, which is one of the more affordable ones. It's just basically a little LED light stick.
Oh,
Nothing
okay.
too fancy about that. The Tiny TV, which is basically the same thing as the Tiny video kit, but it comes with like a little plastic housing for the TV. And then this is where I think, you'd get excited here, Adam, is the
Yeah.
Tiny Arcade DIY or the Pocket Arcade. They're basically like thumb-sized handhelds.
Yeah, that's
Like,
very interesting. Like, let me ask you something. They're so small, it almost seems impractical, but
yeah, it does, doesn't
is it
it?
where this could be the base of maybe a custom unit in general? Where it's almost like the way this is set up, it's easier to maybe leverage what's already there and maybe make a bigger shell or something. I don't know.
Probably so. I mean, it seems like they have a lot of, interesting applications for it. Oh, man, they're sold out of the plant monitor kit. This was one that I actually wanted to get for my wife. Um, Not relevant to Gundam or, like, tabletop or hobbies or anything like that. This is actually a little kit that has, like, pH meters that go into the soil of a potted plant, and then it's got, like, the little LED screen, the same LED screen that is on my video kit, and it tells you, like, when your plants need to be watered and stuff,
That's pretty
so you
amazing.
can just, like yeah, I mean, fantastic technology,
So, does your wife garden then?
No, because she kills everything she touches.
Okay, because I was about to say, I have tried multiple times to have a garden or plants, and it just doesn't work. But
Yeah,
I know people that that's like their hobby, and maybe that's what it is. It's a hobby, and then they're just brilliant at it. Because right now, the only thing that survived, and it's supposed to, is like my mint. I have like in my garden bed, it's just mint now because that was the only thing that would survive. And
well, because like, isn't technically mint like a weed? Like, it's pretty
yeah,
invasive of
is
species.
exactly. But it keeps bugs away. So
It does. Yeah, that is a great bonus. So, definitely plant mint if you haven't.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, here we go. This is that tiny video player kit, and this is probably, it's super user friendly because I don't know if I ever mentioned, like, there's 0 programming that goes into these kits. Like, it's you just upload the video to this SD card and pop it in. Like,
interesting. Yeah, that's yeah.
oh, and it comes with the micro SD adapter. So, like,
Oh,
the
that's
the
nice.
SD card that it comes with is obviously way too small to go into your computer, but it
Yeah.
does have an adapter so that it can be plugged into a larger SD card slot, so
Speaking of that, on Amazon, I found this badass, like, multi it has USB-C, regular USB, and it has
ooh.
all of the card slots, even has USB. I was
That's
able to use
sweet.
this on retro handhelds, on the Fire TV, and my computer. It's a neat little thing to pick up. Yeah.
Yeah, see, I love those types of little dongles and things that, like, because especially, I mean, on my PC, the SD card reader's broken, so everything and it's built into it, so, like, I can't
Oh, yeah.
replace it. So it's like I have to upload all of the footage from my DSLR to the laptop and then transfer it to the
Yeah.
it's but, hey, first world problems.
Yeah. Yeah, right?
Um, and then, yeah, this guy is another one of those, sweet little miniature gaming kits, is the Thummy, which it's
Wow.
like the size of a keychain, and you can what's awesome is that, all of the programming is open source. It's 29 bucks, not bad, um, and comes in a few different colors. I think it actually comes in a translucent color too,
Oh, I like that. But
doesn't it?
let me ask you, like
Mhm.
and I'm being real, like, this obviously is something I think is awesome. But how would you play how would you is someone gonna sit there and maybe that's a world record thing, play through a Castlevania game and beat it? On the no.
I would be impressed. I think that, it's for people that are, I guess, grip challenged, that the Xbox controller is just too girthy for them,
Oh,
they've
yeah.
got this
Yes,
little itty bitty thing.
but I do get it, man. It's the, toying around, and it's like me, I have bought, more of these little retro handheld devices, and it's not like it's doing anything different for me, but I like to set it up, hack it, get specific firmware on it, make it where it's all syncing, and then am I really doing anything with it other than playing on something else? No, but I get it, like, that's
Yeah,
why
part of the
you
charm,
come
I
up
think, is
with
the
stuff.
building it.
Yeah, yeah, there's the
Yeah.
building it, but then you always come up with ways to use these things for other means, which is kinda
Yeah, I
fun.
mean, I would be interested to see how we could, do something a little bit more interesting with something like the Thummy, because it is like it's basically like just a really tiny retro gaming console, but, is there a way that we can expand on it and make it something a little bit more than just a tiny Game Boy?
Yeah, and that's I'm wondering because for what was it, like 30 bucks or something? Or
Yeah,
and you get something that's capable, and because it is a DIY, it doesn't have room to add on, like, a way to have an external display hooked up to it. So it's
yeah.
almost like you could build your own handheld and have it display to maybe something bigger. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you mention that because, one of the advantages of like these tiny circuits builds is that they have shields basically like the same as like an Arduino would, where you can link these different shields together and stack them in a way that, it's like if you
Mm.
wanted to add Bluetooth functionality to it, you can add the Bluetooth shield to it. And then all of a sudden, now you have the ability to sync to Bluetooth devices. There's a Wi Fi shield, there's an accelerometer. So, I mean, you could even maybe make like a game that doesn't necessarily need you to press buttons, like maybe it's a flight sim that you just kind of
Oh,
tilt and
yeah.
like that could
Like
be
that,
an
though.
interesting
Well, and then also, this is where I lack knowledge on the subject. So the way in which the different shields connect or whatever, is that kind of a standard that's used with other circuitry, or is that just specific to this?
So it's specific to this, but there are some ways that you can, expand out from it. So like from the
Like
Tiny Duino
adapters?
platform is the one that has the stacking shields, but the wireling platform actually allows you to take those shields and then have external wires that come off of it so that you can plug it into other devices.
Okay, here we go. That's
And
that
that's
next step then from
exactly.
building the kit to then expanding what it's connected to.
Exactly right. So, and these things can control just about anything, it's like whether it's servo motors or LED lights, and you can like, basically stack them. It's crazy. Or you can, have 5-pin cables that connect them. But if you are interested in playing with the Thummy, you can get 10% off with promo code Hatter at
Ooh.
tinycircuits.com. So I put a link down in the description below if you guys are interested in picking up one of those little guys because I think they're pretty fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get one just for fun. Yeah, especially the price, just to play around with it.
I was gonna say for someone like you that basically is a collector of retro
Yeah.
handhelds, this is like a retro what like thumb held. I don't.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not even a whole hand.
exactly. It's like it's
Uh,
something to do with pinching, like, there has to be the word pinch. It's like a
yeah, the pincer held. I don't know.
oh, yeah, there you go.
But and I love that because all the software is open source and stuff, it's, like, super supported as far as if you wanted to create your own games and create your own software for any of these things. So,
Yeah,
very, very cool stuff.
Kyle's bringing up the, Raspberry Pi, and that's a good example. Like, I think Raspberry Pi was almost like one of those first, like, DIY kits of having a computer, and
Exactly.
I had one of the first or second generations, and the most recent one I have is an older generation, but if you try so this is what's interesting about, like, I guess, power creep, I don't know what the word is. Like, they're very capable devices, even the older ones, but if you try to do modern or more updated software to take advantage of the hardware, it ends up being slower. So this Raspberry Pi I had for 2 years, when I updated the software, it then became slower. Because and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, that's interesting. So I think like Kyle's example, it's like those Raspberry Pis are really good for like if you have a single use case and you want to be able to have full
Yes.
control over it. Like some people build a box that they put on their router, so it just blocks all ads that come in, which is a pretty interesting thing to do.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. Like, and so that's Raspberry Pi and Arduino are platforms that definitely get compared a lot because they can do a lot of the same things. But I think
Uh,
Raspberry Pi is more powerful because it can run software, whereas the Arduino, because it's just a microcontroller, it's really only good at controlling particular devices.
yeah, it's very interesting too because when we're talking about like even looking at this right now, we can see that the Raspberry Pi thing has now evolved to where you
Yeah.
can do a lot more a little easier and on different levels depending on what you want to get into.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different applications for either and both that I think we've only really at least as far as like the Gunpla community and kind of that side of the hobby really have only barely scratched the surface of what can be done. Although I did repost on Twitter that there's that fan that is creating their own like servo powered Zaku
Oh yeah.
that's like 6 feet tall. And honestly, the motions on that and like the controls, to me, it looks better than the life-size Gundam that they just took down in Japan. Like, it
Yeah.
moves faster, it looks more fluid,
Because
but
yeah, in Japan, they're like, is this something we can even do? It's just like, can we even just do it? And then you get, crazy people in their garage, like, how can we make this perfect? Like
yes.
a mad scientist all in it. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy stuff. So, yeah, like I said, definitely check out Tiny Circuits. They're a US-based company, and I can
Oh, that's
confirm
cool.
that they make the smallest Arduino platforms. Like, even the smallest, like, Nano Arduino is twice the length of one of theirs. They're about the size of a
Wow.
quarter, these little shields. So,
That's cool that you're saying they're based in the US, because that's something I was talking about this morning on another, stream about, like, manufacturing. It doesn't happen in the US. We're kinda take these companies take advantage of that, but, yeah,
yes.
knowing this company's doing it in the US, that's actually really cool. That says a lot maybe for the future of the type of electronics we could have manufactured here.
I hope so. I hope that it is indicative of a more, bustling manufacturing economy in the United States, particularly when it comes to electronics, because, yeah, like you said, I think that a lot of it is coming from overseas, and I think a lot of it is, inferior quality for that reason, you know? So, I was gonna bring this up for today's stream because this was another one of those little projects that I did. On Amazon, I bought one of those, you know how, like, those greeting cards you have that you can open up and it'll play a song for you?
Yeah.
I had bought one of those off of Amazon, and it was fairly small. I thought I had it sitting around here somewhere, but basically, I fried it because I reformatted the flash memory on it. It was like, so for some reason, A, I had the damnedest time getting it to load on my Mac, so I had to hop over on my old,
But how did
Windows
you connect it in
laptop.
the first place?
What do you mean?
The flash RAM, I guess, from a
Oh,
card?
well, so it had, like, onboard memory, and so I guess it was, like, basically like a thumb drive, and you
Oh,
plug it in via USB to upload your sounds, and then it
ah,
had a button on it that would play the sound for you. Actually, it had a
I
very
see.
interesting, little device where it was like there were 3 little soldered connections, and it was like that controlled whether it would loop, whether it would play the sound once, or whether it would, like, play the sound and then stop if you pushed it again. So
Huh,
it
interesting.
was interesting, and it was like, oh, part of the instructions, like, in the little paper instructions that were included with it were like, "Oh, if you want it to loop, just solder this connection together." And I was like, "Well, that would have been nice to know." Like, I have a soldering iron, so that's, like, not an issue for me, but I don't think most people do. And then it also had, like, a little screwdriver, like a screw that controlled the volume. So, but what was interesting is I deleted the demo track that was on it, and I uploaded my own audio to it. But even after deleting the onboard, like, the demo track, it still played it after it was done playing the track that I uploaded. So I was like, "I'm just gonna reformat this thing." I reformatted it on my Windows laptop, and it's just bricked. Like, it won't play anything anymore.
Wow.
So, um
That's interesting.
not an issue with something like this, where
Yeah.
it was like, when I plugged in the SD card and it didn't have a video on it, it just says, "No video."
Yeah, it
And
could
there's very detailed instructions on how to convert, like, your MP4 into the video format that they use on here.
okay, and so that could be part of it, like, the card thing you bought was more of the manufacturing process was more of a, like, single use case, like, you do this with it, but if
Yeah,
you wanted to tweak it a little bit more, then like, it's probably just manufactured that way to keep costs down, I wonder, yeah.
possibly so.
Um, yeah, this is neat, and, so the other thing too is I've noticed a lot of, YouTubers that I'll watch that when it's in the tech realm, they'll advertise or be sponsored by PCB Way. It
Yeah,
which is that what we're looking at? We're looking at PCB boards?
yeah, exactly.
And so, I'm assuming with especially what we see with 3D printing technology, that someone could, on a small scale, be able to print their own, and maybe that's what we're seeing, and that's why PCBWay is such a popular thing because it's kinda easier to on-demand sort of manufacturing these. I
Yeah,
don't know.
so I guess traditionally the method for printing PCBs is, you've got, like, the photoreactive, um yeah, I don't know the proper terminology for it, but, you have your plate, right? And you would have to print out, like, a stencil that lays over top of it, and then you soak it in some kind of, solvent that dissolves part of it, and that's what exposes the connectivity so that, all of your connections are where they're supposed to go. Well, I've
Interesting.
been watching a lot of people lately who are using 3D printers, like the resin, SLMA, 3D printers, and what they'll do is they take the image of the PCB design that they want. So it's like, okay, I want this connection to go here, this one to go here. They'll design it out in like, Adobe Illustrator or something like that. And then they'll load it as a single layer 3D print, and then they just carefully place the PCB on top of it and expose it to the UV light, and that's what prints the image on there, and then they can soak it in, like, whatever acid it is that activates it, and that's what kind of exposes the, connections. Again,
That's crazy
not
stuff.
my area of
Yeah.
expertise,
Mhm.
but the fact that people are now able to kind of print their own PCBs at home is
That's
pretty
awesome.
cool.
Yeah.
And I've seen some pretty interesting custom ones, like, a few years ago, I had a tiny, like, micro drone, and the PCB in there was not much bigger than one of these, but what was interesting about it is that it had these cutaways where it was almost T-shaped in order to allow for the motors that controlled the propellers to sit inside the PCB.
That's neat. And so that FGPA FPGA that we were talking about, I forget the
Oh,
actual
yeah.
acronym. And that's kind of the same way, right? Like it's where people are designing these PCB boards. They just happen to, and that's the thing. I guess as time goes, like for instance, what it takes to make a Sega Genesis is now not a big deal. To the point to
Yeah.
where you can software program what it's supposed to do. And and so yeah, this what this thing is it's basically yeah, hardware that can play video games like ROMs like natively, how they would be on the hardware, even glitches and all. And you would buy a circuit board, and then for each core or each console, you would buy a separate one to plug it in. And they became pretty big if you get everything.
Yeah.
And I follow this because I'm totally into it. But the only reason I never got into it's like, well, the pricing and the setup would there would be so much to it that I can just get the same thing out of just software emulation that I'm doing. But
Yeah.
it seems like what we're seeing now is the construction and the engineering of these PCB boards can now be so much smaller and so much easier where they've got it now to where the Mr. FPGA, whatever, it can now be a lot smaller. Um,
Yeah, and they can do it much more affordably too, like, even using the same processors, but mounted in different ways. So for those of you guys who don't know, this thing, the kits usually run for, like, what, 259 or 300 bucks,
oh, yeah.
for one of these big guys. But there's a new Mr. FPGA that's about to come out that's a kit that is not only smaller and, like, miniaturized, but also 99 bucks,
Yeah.
which
Love
that
it.
is fantastic.
Yeah. As soon
And
as it's available to buy, I'm buying it. That's
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And so it actually comes with 2 RAM options. So I think there's, like, uh do you remember what they were, Adam?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I do remember, yeah, there was like the options of what depending on what you wanna do with it. Yeah.
Yeah, because right now there's only certain existing cores, right? But if you
Yep.
ever wanted to, you know, play a more advanced system, like a more advanced core, then you would need to
Yep.
get like the higher RAM
Like, there's stuff
memory
that
stick.
like, for instance, right now you can get the stuff that can play Genesis, Super Nintendo, but Saturn is, like, the hardest one right now to emulate, and so they're always
Yes.
updating the core. So some people just won't buy that module just because it's not working totally.
And this is pretty cool too, is that you have the option of using just about like any controller that you want. Like Uh, that to me is almost worth it in terms of, like, compatibility with other products, because normally, if you're gonna get a device like this, it's like you're kind of locked into one, um, I guess, what would you call it, like, an input factor? Like, whatever your
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's another thing. It reminds me of back on the Raspberry Pi, how hard it was sometimes to get it to C controller, map a controller. So I'm really curious, and just because it's like native, it's like running natively. It's like I wonder if you just plug in a controller and it will just use the input as it would have maybe on that console. I don't know.
that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that would, affect the speedrunning community at all, because I know that there is a huge
Oh
debate
yeah.
between, native hardware versus emulation. Well, in a lot of cases, I know that there's a Super Mario speedrunner that prefers the emulated model, not because of any techniques that he particularly does that he can't do on a controller, that he can't do on the normal device, but I think it had something to do with, like, either resolution or load time, something like
Hmm,
that.
oh, yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, people were giving him a hard time because it was like, "Oh, well, you're only doing well because you're playing on keyboard and mouse," and it was like, "Well, no, I can do it on the Nintendo controller, I just prefer to play it on PC," so, but
Yeah,
so this would open up that option to play emulated on hardware.
well, I wonder if then that would be a new category. Would that be considered maybe regular hardware? Because or would they say, "Oh, there's yeah, regular hardware, software emulation, and then hardware emulation." I wonder if yeah, there'll be a 3rd category.
That would be pretty cool to
I'm
open it up
curious.
like that.
Um, yeah, and so the other thing too with this that is the interesting aspect is because you have the original hardware, that next step is then plugging it up to a device or a display device. So back when I was really into having physical hardware, I had a Sony PVM and an NEC XM29, which are like the two best CRT displays you could possibly have. Uh,
Nice.
and story I've told before, I got the NEC XM29 from I think it was in Houston or San Antonio at a university, and someone was coming up from there, and they went ahead and picked them up for me, 400 each, because one was going to my friend. And then I had it for a while, but took up so much room, and then even at that point, I was getting to where I was kind of tired of having all this physical video game stuff when it's like I liked collecting it, but I liked playing it more. So that was more the factor. And then
Yeah.
I had made a video on my Blue Gamer channel about the NEC XM29, and then someone emailed me offering like $1,000 if they could buy it because these things are rare. And he
Yeah.
drove down from somewhere up north around the Michigan area, I can recall, and then drove down here just to pick it up because that's how much these things were needed. So what a lot of people are doing then with these is once they're building it, you get like a SCART out component S video. It really depends on the console. It's all different.
Yeah.
That's where sometimes you get too in the weeds of something and then you're missing the point because I was like calibrating to get the perfect pixel density within the CRT scan lines and then after a while, I was like, "Okay, I'm not even playing these games anymore. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to make them look pixel perfect," which I didn't experience that when I was a kid because I played on a standard CRT with standard AV, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And to me, again, a lot of these kits kind of take some of that fun out of it because, I wouldn't want to buy it with the aluminum case that they sell it with. Like, I'd probably want to try and 3D print my own, custom case that's like
Yeah, my
maybe
Raspberry Pi is a Genesis case on it. Yeah, Sega Genesis, yeah.
exactly. You can have some fun with it and make something that really feels retro. And even King Dylan mentions like, oh yeah, you can make a nice game cabinet like out of the Mr.
So,
FPGA.
that's the thing I've thought about is how to make a game cabinet because I have an external display just sitting there, and all that's plugged into it is one of my retro handhelds, just so anyone can come by and then just play. Like, it's almost like an arcade right there. But, yeah, it's like, I actually need to build a cabinet to kinda seal that deal.
Like I said, man, my dream restaurant slash bar setup is booths that are wrapped around like a video game cabinet that just can emulate anything, and you can sit there and uh it would probably be like a bowling alley where you pay by the hour instead of paying by like
Oh, yeah.
you know and that way it's like, oh, you're not just there's no incentive to just basically sit there and beat Dark Souls.
Yeah. That's funny.
But I'm glad that you mentioned, like, original hardware and stuff because this is something that I brought up to you, not too long ago is the, Retro Gem from Pixel FX. So if you're not into the software emulation side of video games, you can go to original hardware and just upscale it to, your
Oh, yeah.
modern TVs. And this is available for a number of different consoles. So, the PS2 Slim, PS2 Fat, the PS1, N64, and it just plugs into the existing hardware here. Um, so this
So
is
you
it.
you modify the original hardware?
Yeah, you modify the original hardware. Basically, this is the kit, and you
Oh.
solder on. this ribbon cable to the motherboard of your console, and then you can see like the where the Ethernet port was on this PS1 has now become an HDMI port.
You know, that's neat because that's an option because the way that I was looking at it, even back when I still had my uh, actual hardware, was you could spend like $500 to $600 to get an upscaler device made specifically for gaming consoles. So when you plugged in, it knew, oh, that's 240 and it's going to a display that's 4K. So it knew how to do the integer scaling. You know, I'm not too good at math, but to like make it look pixel perfect. But
Yeah,
for a fraction of the price, if you're good at soldering, you know, or
yeah.
doing all that stuff. There you go.
And in fact, they also even you have the option to throw in a spare cable in case you screw up because they know that it's a difficult
Oh,
modification to make. Um, and this is interesting is with the PS2, it actually replaces the power with a USB. So instead of
wow.
powering it via the like traditional, I guess,
Normal.
like 12-volt adapter, you can power it with a USB cable.
That's pretty amazing, actually. I've
Yeah,
even seen, mods for 3DSs to put a USB-C port in, and it does video out. It's crazy.
yeah, that's pretty sweet, and it reminds me of, like, that, everyone talks about, like, the mystery port on the, PS Vita.
Oh, yeah.
Where is it? So it's like so here's the charging port, um,
Either
maybe
the
I have it
PSP or
covered
the
up.
Vita. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. There was, like, this port that n there was nothing they released that, worked
Yeah,
with it.
yeah, I think it's this top port here.
Yeah, that could be it.
So it's sealed up underneath a plate next to where you would put your game cartridge in, but yeah, it was so there have been people I think that have tried to utilize that for, like, link play and things like that,
Oh,
so,
yeah.
um, yeah, I saw some interesting stuff with doing that, but yeah, look at some of these features with the, retro gem because, you know, you have the standard one and then the shiny, which actually
Oh.
upscales to 1440p. Um, it has a motion adaptive, weave. Neither of them look like they have a scaler, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's weird that
Um
it's there but not checked for either. Almost saying like, "Yeah, these aren't the products for you." So
Either that or maybe they have something, you know, in the
oh,
works that
yeah.
like a premium version. Um, but yeah, you can get the scan lines on there. Well, it's interesting that the deinterlacer isn't available on either one, especially when that is like a standard feature in Handbrake. So,
Yeah, and, King Dylan saying, "I wanna make one for my kids, they can play all the games that I played as a kid." Right
yeah.
now, what you can do, which is really awesome, you can spend between 30 and $80 and get a retro handheld that plays all games, HDMI out to your computer, uh, Bluetooth controllers to it. I haven't found the perfect one yet because out of all the retro handheld consoles I have, some things work and some things don't. So, but yeah, that you can do that right now. I actually had it set up so my wife could play, was it Castle of Illusion, Mickey Mouse? You know,
Oh, yeah.
easily whenever.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of, like, third-party options. There's even, like, the first-party options if you just wanna get, like, the Switch Online, but it's interesting to me that, you know, that Mr. FPGA actually has better emulation of the authentic software and the authentic devices than the Nintendo Switch Online emulations, like, those ones
It's
are
so weird. It's like, why not go this route? Especially with backwards compatibility being a thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's close to like what I was talking about before. Where you can actually buy a device that,
yeah, a 4K upscaler.
yeah.
Um, and I mean, some of them are I don't know whether this one is good or not, but I imagine that, you know, Pixel Effects is a pretty solid company, so I imagine that this is a great upscaler.
Yeah, there's things to look at, like what resolutions it can upscale. There's like little things sometimes that like you want to look at depending on what console you want to use.
Yeah, and how it handles, what you call it, like the frame ratio? What do you call that?
I think, yeah, frame ratio.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, because that's a big deal too, the ratio, because it's different between NES, Genesis, and all that.
Right,
But
and that's
I
what gives a lot of games like that squashed look is
yeah,
when you're upscaling and they're actually meant to, like,
the
so
overscan, because it'll be like the garbled pixels on
exactly.
yeah.
So, yeah.
You wanna be able to tweak that stuff depending on and but I'm seeing on here wireless updates and, it looks like an expansion support, so for $400, that seems like a good deal.
Yeah,
Uh,
I would say so.
yeah.
Um,
So, that's the other thing, like, does the FPGA then output does the output consider this? Or would you still need something like this between your display and the FPGA? Yeah,
so I don't think that the FPGA upscales.
right.
So you might still get the HDMI out,
Mhm.
but you if you wanted to upscale it, then, you'd have to have something else. But I do know that, like, when I've seen people with their Mr. FPGAs, they've gone in and, like, in the settings, you can tweak those things like, scan lines and,
Oh,
like, so all of that stuff is controlled on board. It just doesn't upscale the picture.
okay, cool.
But
Yeah, this stuff's cool.
yeah, so, and this is probably a little bit more advanced than the stuff we were talking about, earlier, but again, that's what this is all about, is hopefully, kind of getting you guys excited about different things that you can, experiment with in your hobbies and kinda get your hands dirty. I'm trying to think of any other ones that came up recently.
Yeah, because if
Um
I'm not yeah, tweaking the, retro handheld consoles, like, I remember back in the day, my thing was with phones, I liked to load custom ROMs, not like ROM, like a video game ROM, but like the ROM of the
like the
phone,
OS.
and it was just fun to do that. Like, I didn't know what I was getting out of it, but there was something about and that's what's weird too, is I get all excited about this random stuff that doesn't really do anything, but I don't put that much effort into things that could get me somewhere else. I don't know, it's one of those
I don't
weird
know. I
things.
mean, there's some fun stuff that you can get into, and then you never know when those things are gonna have applications somewhere else.
Yeah, sure.
Like I didn't realize how much my experience programming in Unity would make working on an Arduino platform so much easier and more accessible to me. Um,
Yeah, and I've even learned just having to learn Linux style stuff through the years, and especially on, the retro handhelds lately, that's kinda helped me understand networking a bit better when I'm having to look at certain variables to understand networking issues that are coming up, how to resolve network issues, and I think it's because the language Linux uses very, like, baseline, bare bones, like, you're kinda seeing how the stuff works, whereas Windows
yeah.
covers that up just to make it user friendly,
Mhm.
in a way, but the options are there, if you want it.
And I think that that's probably the number one takeaway from today's show is that, like, you can get real in depth and, like, really dig into some of this stuff, or there are options if you just kind of want to dip your toe in the water. Like I said, or like you mentioned with the audio player is like that was not designed for someone who's gonna, like, do a whole lot of customizations to it. It's like you are just going to play one audio track here.
Yeah.
And then similar with, like, the custom Tonys, it's like, you can pay $10 for the custom Tony and get just uploading your own music or whatever. But if you really want to get into it, like, you could take that custom Tony, take it apart, put the unit inside of a Gunpla. Or if you really want to get into it, you can buy your own NFC chip and program it and everything. And then you can get, like, probably
Whatever.
really far into the weeds, but
Yeah.
and start making your own amiibos and stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. That is cool.
um But yeah, so that's kind of like the sort of things that I've been tinkering with, and like I said, in particular, I am a huge fan of these tiny circuits devices, in particular because they have made it easy to scale your projects. So, for instance, this is the USB shield. Um, this literally it has one function. It just talks from your computer to the device. That's it. But the thing is, you only need one of these, and you can program any number of devices because once you program it, you take it off and you don't need it anymore unless you want to, and that's awesome to me. Is it's
That
like,
is.
um, and then you have so many other options that you can plug onto there to experiment with. So
Yeah.
and so that's the other thing is it's like it's kind of affordable to get started on some of this stuff. So
Yeah.
the to me, I think that the price barrier to entry and then the skill barrier to entry are both low enough that I think more people should be excuse me, more people should be getting into these things as far as their Gunpla, action figures, what have you.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you can really integrate this into current hobbies right now. Yeah, even gardening, which we've learned. But
yeah, exactly.
and real quick, it reminds me there's this you can actually buy and build a Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance for like 80 bucks. With again, it's like just you buy a kit online for 80 bucks and you build it yourself. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, see? Oh, here we go. So let me pull this up because this is another one that I have played with in the past. You guys have seen me make videos about this.
Oh
Is the
yeah.
old wireless induction LEDs. Um, 14 bucks for this particular kit, and it looks like it is powered by just a standard USB cable.
Huh. That
Comes
would
with
be
what,
pretty cool
12.
to I mean, for $14, just to kinda get an idea of what you would wanna do.
Yeah, I mean, a fairly low barrier to entry, and like they've got some inspirational things here that they've done with it. And I recently did that video of taking the LED off of the little ring and then extending it
Oh,
out,
yeah.
which I I love. Somebody commented on it and they were like, "Congratulations, you successfully wired a wireless LED." And I was like, "That's I
Funny.
did that. That was the thing that I did." So, this is one of those cool things that I think, people should play with more as well. You know,
Yeah, that is cool.
especially for things like tabletop gaming, I feel like this has some really unique applications. Like if you were to bury the LEDs inside of a miniature or a 3D printed figure, and then like you're moving them around on a map, and it's like maybe there's an area of the map that you have covered with the induction ring.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always thought that would be a great idea
Yeah.
'cause
And it blows my mind that you know more companies aren't doing more things with these, like
I would think Bandai would have a Gunpla tabletop experience for people that wanna do more with their Gunpla. That seems so obvious.
no, of course not. They're gonna do the metaverse, and they're gonna go all in on that,
Yeah,
um,
that's true.
but, yeah, and so, spoiler alert, I actually did, apply to a job at, Hasbro, um, and I didn't get it, but I was like, "Man, if I could take some of these crazy ideas," and like I said, it's not even like they cost that much, like, you could build $15 into the price of a board game to
Yeah,
have
knowing it has all
for
these extra features.
yeah,
And what if they're features that get more people into it? Because it's like the concept of tabletop games are cool, but when I've done it, it's always been too analog for me. Like, yeah, I like my imagination, but I also like to can I represent my imagination
yeah,
that I can interact with and having yeah, tabletop games that have more electronic components using magnets or lighting or whatever it is. Um, that would get me into it.
yeah, absolutely,
Wait,
um,
do you see what Johnny Tacoma says? Gundam is coming to Warhammer 40K. Is that something?
that I did see that announcement. I do believe that that's a thing that's gonna happen. I don't
Wait,
know I don't know how I feel about it necessarily.
wait.
What do you think?
I mean, that could be cool. Does that mean they're gonna start coming out with miniatures?
Yeah, yeah, although it'll be interesting to see, like, the scale comparison because I
Yeah.
think that a mobile suit is probably about the same size as one of those, what is it, like a juggernaut or
Right. Yeah. I that sound I'm gonna have to look this up later because that is something I could totally get into, and I that could open up Gundam. This is a great idea. It could open up Gundam to a wider audience.
oh, yeah. The promo art looks fantastic, and, I mean, if we can just get Henry Cavill on board, then, sky's the
Oh,
limit, right?
yeah. Wow. Let's see. I just did a search real quick, and Nothing seemed to pop up, but maybe I'll spend some time later and look at that.
I saw someone post something about it on my Discord. There was actually a YouTube video that came out about it,
Oh.
and it's tough because there are obviously a lot of people um that have created their own, like, Gundam Warhammer 40K miniatures and things like that.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait, upcoming Call of Duty crossovers will include Gundam? That's interesting. I brought that up at the Bandai offices when I was there last year.
Wait a second.
I don't know if this is real, I'm just seeing it on this Kit Guru website. Um, but
Johnny
yeah,
Tacoma, you're a troll because I see that the Warhammer 40K collaboration with Gundam was an April 1st joke. Yeah, it was on
Oh,
TikTok.
that because
Um,
see, that makes sense. That's why we were excited. How is that an April Fool's joke? That's
yeah,
that's
don't
not,
toy with my emotions like that.
um, interesting.
You
Okay.
got me. Okay, fair enough. Well, that said, you actually can create your own Gundam miniatures for Warhammer 40K if you have a 3D printer or if you just, go on eBay and look for one of those 1/400th scale,
So,
figures.
yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm just fascinated by this. So, they data mined Call of Duty to find a Gundam, Fallout, and Crow crossover.
The
And
Crow, interesting.
yeah, that makes sense because there's a new Crow movie, Fallout,
Yeah,
show that's Microsoft. Gundam, I bet it's Requiem for Vengeance related,
probably.
which again I brought up to the execs at Bandai when I was there. Not that I did anything, but
Yeah, I'll take credit for it.
yeah, I can't believe I missed this. This was 6 days ago.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, I remember somebody posted a video about it, and I was like, "Huh, interesting, okay." But then it didn't occur to me that it was posted on April 1st, and I was like, "Oh, yeah." So it's right up there with the Kshatriya Master Grade.
Oh yeah, that yeah, huh. My mind is blown right now.
I know, we're unlocking so many potential, partnerships and crossovers between Gundam and other properties, and I think, to your point, Requiem for Vengeance is going to do that.
Yeah.
It's going to invite those collaborations, um, as long as it's not, internet trolls trying to get their April 1st jollies.
Yeah, I know. uh,
But, yeah, hopefully you guys have, gotten inspired to tinker around and, toy with some of this stuff because I think that there's some potential for doing some cool stuff. Honestly, it's
yeah.
like I'm thinking about picking up the Thummy and instead of using the screen on my Zeta Gundam diorama, what if I put the Thummy screen in there and actually make it so that you can play a game from Camille's perspective? I don't know.
I mean, just having the buttons accessible right there is actually a pretty neat idea.
Yeah.
Anyway,
We'll see
uh,
if we can do that because I mean, that would be just
even if it's
loads
just
of
like
fun.
one button where you can press it from the cockpit or
Oh,
something.
yeah.
Yeah. That'd be
Oh, well, before we leave, let's leave on this thought. What Gundam collab would you guys want? So, Adam, not to put you on the spot, but what would you
yeah, Gundam collab. I think an obvious one would be Halo, just because Microsoft and I don't know what that would be exactly, what that would look like, but I feel like that's a cool crossover where there's people that like Gundam and Halo, uh,
Yeah,
but I bet a lot of people that like Gundam that don't really care too much about Halo, or even vice versa. People that love Halo don't know about Gundam, but there's a lot of history there, and some of the
yeah,
looks too are very similar.
yeah, the GM Spartan, in fact, inspiring
Yeah.
look of Master Chief, which is, a pretty neat bit of trivia
Oh,
there.
here we go. Because X-Men is all the rage. What about a Gundam that has beam claws that come out of its hand?
That's actually pretty sweet.
That is.
I'm surprised that they never did something like
Yeah.
that.
And sure enough, someone in chat will say they have, but no,
Right.
even like they kind of do this, but like the Cyclops shooting out of the eye. The closest thing is like the Double Zeta has that beam on its head, but
Yeah.
for a Gundam to shoot out of its eyes, just for
would be pretty
fun.
sweet. Just 'cause. And I'm surprised that you don't see that in something like G Gundam where, like, the I don't wanna say realism doesn't matter, but, like, they're a little bit more absurdist in G Gundam, so,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if I should share Kyle's recommendation or not. Magic wand vibrator. Um, that wouldn't be my first choice, but I can definitely see it being popular. I'm trying to think what would be a awesome Gundam collaboration, and, you know, I really want to see a well done Gundam board game, and so far, the ones that have come out are very stiff and not very what's the word I'm looking for? They're just not very immersive. So
Yeah, they kinda go it's like basic board gaming tropes, not necessarily like, "Let's make this feel like Gundam," just like the video games, you know?
yeah. So that's where I would want to see either, a Hero Scape or, like, Hero Clicks Gundam
Yeah,
crossover, particularly if they could come up with a PvE component,
yeah.
because typically those are PvP games, and I think it would be cool to have a PvE version. So yeah, on that note, thank you guys for tuning in. This is a fun stream for me because I just love kind of sharing these things with you, and I'm gonna keep experimenting with them and obviously document my results. But I want to see
Good.
what you guys do, and hopefully, one of the things I've been talking about is opening up the Patreon to do monthly, submissions. So if you guys are into that, let me know, and
Hmm,
I will make like a whole like submission portion of the Patreon so that people can like we will have like a monthly theme for like builds and stuff, and then every month we'll do a stream sharing everybody's work.
yeah. I think that's a good
Totally,
idea.
opt in, it's not like a required thing. I'm not gonna demand you guys give me your submissions. But, if you wanted to show off your work, then, I'm always happy to oblige. If you haven't, go check out Adam's video from this morning,
Oh,
a
yeah.
and watch Adam's stream from this morning, over on Blue
Oh, Blue
Gamer. I
Gamer,
don't have
thank
the
you.
link for that down in the description, but yeah, search Blue Gamer on YouTube because that was a very, um, what's the word I'm looking for? It was a
It was
very
a
poignant
concise
stream.
way to get deeper into a subject that like
Yes,
the
I
internet
I
likes.
I really appreciated you offering your feedback on what has been a very contentious topic and a very, vitriolic news cycle,
Yeah,
and you guys know Adam, you know that he always is the voice of reason when it comes to these things,
try
so
to be.
definitely give that a look, until then, we'll catch you tomorrow for the Gundam Explained show.
See y'all.